Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red. Welcome to the Forum, the show where we learn more about Husker Nation one fan at a time by asking them the same 4 questions. I'm your host, Anki, and our guest tonight is another in the long line of Twitter royalty that we've invited onto the show. He is a former walk-on at NU, an Iraq war veteran, and most important, a huge Husker fan. He's also the king of mom jokes, so if my mom is following along live, you might want to plug your ears. Welcome to the Forum, HuskJohnny.
Hey, what's up, man? Good to be here. Excited.
Yeah, no,
Mom said hi.
Before we get going though, Johnny, I got to ask you here, and I have a tweet I have to show. How's the swag going for you? I know we sent you some swag, Rob. Oh, you got it on right now.
I got the shirt. I got my Diet Dr. Pepper in my little koozie right here. I already ate the jerky, so sorry about I can't show you that, but that's down here.
Yeah, so there's a
layer koozie, of the jerky on top here.
Koozie shirt and a couple of pipeline jerkies there that Redcast Rob sent you. No, that's fun. That's awesome, man.
That was awesome. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I guess I should go over our upcoming shows real quick here and our regular promos. Next week at the exact same time, Wednesday, March 8th at 8 p.m., we'll have Redcast Abby on, the face of Husker Twitter, at Abby something. And then I'm off a week. I'm going up to Denver to see Dave and Rob and do March Madness. And we come back on March 22nd at the same time, 8 p.m. We'll have Connor Hayden of Corn Craze, the #1 Nebraska football talk show on YouTube. So he'll be March 22nd. And then we've got, oh man, I mean, I'm probably booked out about 2 months on these shows right now. So I've got quite a few of those coming up. This is just a promo that we're having, that there is going to be Nebraska Podcast Awards that are coming up in August. And No Block, No Rock guys, they're kind of putting that on. Nebraska Brewing Company. So we are proud to be part of that. And last but not least, that swag that you're wearing there, HuskJohnny, that is from Smack and Smooch. You can use the QR code up there. Let me take the little, there's the QR code, shirts, sweatshirts, koozies, you name it. We got a bunch of good stuff there. Thank you very much to Smack and Smooch. Well, let's get started here with the first question, Johnny. And it's the easiest one. It's the lob of them all. But why are you a Husker fan?
Well, interestingly enough, I actually grew up a huge Hawkeye fan, and so my dream growing up was to play for the University of Iowa. But when I was coming out of high school, they didn't recruit me. And so I got really mad and figured I'd get back at them by becoming a Husker fan and then just troll them constantly on Twitter. My name is actually Casey, by the way, not Johnny as well. So
okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same old story.
I didn't catch that at first. Yeah, now I got it.
Yeah,
okay,
you got that right.
Yeah, it took me a second.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is actually just boring. Like I wasn't born in Nebraska, but I grew up in Nebraska. Born in Wyoming and moved to Nebraska when I was 5. And like when you live in Nebraska, you're a Husker fan, unless you're kind of a nerd like my little brother who wants to be contrarian. But so, yeah, I mean, all my older brothers are Husker fans. Everyone at school is a Husker fan. It's kind of like, you hear about Texas high school football. Well, Nebraska, that's what it is. So.
Well, what was the first year that you remember Husker football from start to finish?
Well, that's the thing is like my memories start my actual first like vivid memory. So I have I can vaguely remember when Mickey played, right? And I can kind of remember this #2 kind of, like almost dancing all over the field. But like my first vivid memory is the Orange Bowl against Florida State when we missing that kick is like my I think it was just that pain stuck with me. And so That's like my first vivid memory of Husker football is pain, which is fitting. But then,
Mm,
yeah, then we went 94, 95, 97. So, but that was kind of like right when I was going into junior high and high school. So I kind of grew up just, that was the expectation. Like we just
Well,
won all the time.
you're 10 years behind me. My first year was 83, yours
Okay.
93, but it's the same kind of thing. You have their great seasons. I mean, both of them went 12-0, and you get to the Orange Bowl, and in both cases, it was a very painful last second loss. For me, it's the 2-point conversion Turner Gill play. It's the
Yeah.
Byron Bennett kick. But I mean, those are the formative years, and that's what I love talking with different fans about. I've had Chaz in SoCal, so someone that grew up, remembering Devaney era stuff, and I want to get a few more
Mm.
even younger generation kids that maybe don't remember the good years, but
Those
it's
poor
always
suckers.
interesting. Yeah, but it's good to get the formative, like what type of fan you are today. So many times is kind of rooted in what that first year or two of following them was like,
Oh,
and for you there, I mean, what a great first year memory. Even though it was a little painful, you saw us playing for the national championship and then turning around and winning them right away.
yeah. I think that's why I am the way that I am. Like the way I relate to it, the way that I am is because that was my kind of formative years. And like I remember like like going to the university, like the first year I went to the university, and there was like this in like the registrar's office. There was like this laid out thing in the office that was like the road to the national championship, and it had like all the games laid out or whatever. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember like we lost a game that year or whatever, and there was like a detour sign, and it was like we're gonna detour around the like that was the expectation. And
Mm-hmm.
then everything kind of went to hell. And looking back, I can realize, well, we were spoiled.
Oh
And
yeah.
so now it's like I'm trying to approach this from the perspective of not being spoiled and appreciating the things that we do get, even if it's a 4-8 season, but we beat Iowa. Like let's enjoy it and appreciate it, because next year might be 3-9. It could be 2-10.
Mm-hmm.
We could get blown out by Iowa. Like it could be. People who say it can't be worse. Like it could totally be worse.
Oh yeah.
So
Well,
like I just
we
try to like not be spoiled with it, whatever we get.
I think that's a great way of saying it, because we were spoiled as a fan base for 40 years there, from 1962 to 2003. All we would do is win 9 games or more and make bowl
Yeah.
games, and it so much so to the fact that you could go 9-3 and fire a coach and say we don't want to gravitate to mediocrity. And ever since that statement was made at 9-3, we haven't had a season where we've lost less than
I would
4
love to
every
gravitate
year.
toward mediocrity right now.
Every year. I would take mediocrity so much
Mediocrity.
right now. Please, let's get back to mediocrity, right? But
If 9
every year
wins is
since that's
mediocrity.
every year since that statement, we haven't lost 3 or less again. So I mean, that's kind of the craziness of where we're at. But there was a Husker Vision tape. I remember 97, and I think it was the Tom Osborne one that was like a day in the life of Husker football. And it was like 24 hours of Husker football. They went to Lincoln from like noon on Friday through the football game and through the end of it. But on Friday they went to like the Big Red Shop, and this is in mid October, and they talked to some old fan, some old guy, and they're like, how do you think Nebraska's going to do? And he goes, well, we're going to play in the Big 12 title game, and I know it because I've already bought my ticket to San Antonio, and I got my plane ticket, and we're flying down there. And it's like, that was when you want to talk about just the expectations were there, but also we're just going to do it. I mean, I'm buying my tickets. I'm going to be there because we're going to be there. And that's how it was. Yeah, we took some things for granted back then.
Oh man. Yeah. Like we've been fed the medicine. We've learned our lesson, I hope. So I hope if we get things going, get up to 8-9 wins, at least we can at least take a year or two where we're like, okay, and then we can get to where, okay, let's get better. But yeah, it was. So yeah, that was kind of my formative years. So I think that definitely informs like how I look at things now.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go to question number 2 then. What is your favorite Husker fan memory?
Oh man. Yeah, there's a lot that I could go through. I think, don't you ask a question about who the favorite Husker is? It's actually tied.
And actually, I screwed up here. I should have said this is the 4 questions. I have not walked. If you're brand new to the forum, we ask these 4. Why are you a Huskers fan? Your favorite fan memory? Who are your all-time favorite Huskers? And then how do you think they'll do next year? So yeah, that will be coming up next. But this one here is, what's your favorite Husker fan memory?
Yeah, so they're kind of tied together because the player is also part of the memory.
Okay.
But I would say like outside of like the walk on thing and all of that, like like watching games and so forth, it would definitely be the last year we were in the Big 12 and we played Kansas State that year. Because I think
Okay.
we went, if I remember right, we went into that game undefeated, and they may have even been undefeated
Like a
at that point in
Thursday
my
night. I think it was a Thursday night game. Taylor
yeah, may have
Martinez.
been or whatever. And Taylor
Mhm.
Martinez just destroyed them, right? You remember he just ran
Mhm.
all over them. Anyway, so I was mobilized. So we were stateside. We were training guys that were deploying over to Iraq. This was after I had got back, and they would take guys that had been over and put them in units to train the guys that were going back over. So anyway, we were in Texas, but we had been in Fort Riley for a long time, and we had guys in our unit that were kind of lived around Fort Riley, were from Kansas. So I had a really good buddy of
Mhm.
mine. I had two buddies. One was a big Husker fan, and one was a big Kansas State fan. So we went over to our friend that was a Kansas State fan. We went to his house to all watch the game together, and he was just talking so much smack before the game. And then, Taylor goes off in the first half, and I just remember come
Mhm.
out for the second half, and I remember Craig James saying, this is Bill Snyder. He's gonna adjust. They're gonna do something different. Da 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 da. And my friend's like, all right, we're gonna do this. And then Taylor, like, it's like the first or second play, he races off for like a 70-yard touchdown. And I just remember watching like everything drain out of my friends, like all of the hope. And I think that's my favorite memory because like I've now been on the other side of that. So I can remember someone else experiencing that. But yeah. So then we had a bet that whoever lost, they had to put on like the other team's gear. So we had to put on a bunch of Husker gear and then we took a picture, and he had to keep that as his profile picture on Facebook for till the end of the calendar year or whatever. So we
Oh,
just like loaded him up with all sorts of stuff. So anyway,
that's awesome.
that's probably my favorite memory because it was like, I think we were undefeated. It was all the trash talk with him, and it was like, hey,
Mhm.
like we might be back at this point. And then I think
Mhm.
Taylor ended up getting hurt.
Yeah, he got
Chargers
hurt
like
in
a
that
little
Missouri
later.
game a few games later, and he came out
Yeah.
hot against them. But that injury, oddly enough, I watched that K-State game just recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I know exactly the play you're talking about. Right after halftime, I mean, it was a great first
Yeah.
half, and then but it was a big deal. Like K-State, if they can make an early stop, maybe they can get back into it. And it was like a third down. It was like third and long, and it was like the crowd's going nuts. They're going to stop us. They're going to force a punt. And he just takes off up the gut and goes like 80 yards. And
I
like
was like right up the middle.
yeah, and he couldn't have been more than like 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, and they're already like, oh, he's gone. And
Yeah.
like
He's gone.
the crowd, you could the
Craig
entire crowd.
James was like, well,
Yeah,
they didn't know what
folks,
to say.
this one's over, folks. Well, you mentioned something there. You mentioned about being a walk on, and I brought that up early on here with you. Tell us a little bit about that story. We haven't had a lot of former walk ons yet, I don't think, on the forum. So I'd like to get that perspective and what was that like? What years and everything?
Yeah, I tried not to oversell it because I wasn't for very long. I
Mhm.
basically made it through winter conditioning. So I don't know how they do it now or did it before or whatever. Maybe that year was different or whatever. But so back then they would have, well, again, that year, maybe it was different other years. I don't know. But they had open tryouts. So I
Mhm.
wasn't like, I had gone to a smaller school my freshman year and then transferred. And I was like, I'm just going to do this and like go for it. So I'd spent the first semester of that. I spent the first semester of that year, which would have been the football season, that football
Like what
season.
year was that?
So it would have been, the tryout was like like in December of 2000.
Okay.
So, and then I made that and was on for winter conditioning of 2001. So it was that 2001 season where they played in the national
Mhm.
championship. So, and I remember Crouch was like, he wasn't at winter conditioning because he was getting shoulder surgery, I think, or something like that. I remember he wasn't there, had some sort
Mhm.
of injury or whatever. But anyway, yeah. So they had open tryouts. And so I just went to when I left the school I was at, I had planned the whole time. I knew they had the open tryouts. So I spent that whole first semester just training. Like I would run and do sprints. I knew what the events were. So I just practiced them over
Mhm.
and over, ran 40s, all that stuff. So anyway, went to the open tryouts, and it was like, again, I don't know if it's like this anymore, but I mean, it was a huge event. Like there was stuff outside on campus and all that. I mean, and I think they said there was like 2,000 or 3,000 people that showed up that year for the open trial. So it was a big deal back then. Yeah. So I don't know if they still do that or whatever. But yeah, I ran a 40, ran a 10-yard dash, vertical, and then the agility run is what they have you do. And they basically just look at the times and the people, and they pick, they ended up picking 10 people.
Mm-hmm.
So I was one of those, and went into winter conditioning and went through that. And I mean, depends how deep you want to get into it or whatever. There's a bunch of stories in there, but went through winter conditioning, and then you test again. And that year they ended up selecting just one person of the 10. So, and it wasn't me. It was his last name was Brandenburg. But I don't think it was Lance, because Lance came out
he was a scholarship linebacker. Yeah, Lance was.
So it was a Brandenburg kid, and the dude was a freak. Like, he ran like a 4.4. He had like a 40-inch vertical. I remember we'd be in lifting, and we'd be doing pull-ups, and he'd just be like, boop, boop. Be like 3 sets of 10, and he'd just sit there and just rack out 10 pull-ups like it was nothing. I mean, he was a freak, so he's the one that they kept that year or whatever.
Well, it's interesting to put in perspective, for the viewers, that time frame. I mean, coming off, you said December 2000, that's Nebraska going and playing in the Alamo Bowl and destroying Northwestern, a Big Ten champion Northwestern. And Dan Alexander runs for 200 yards and it's a huge game. And now you've got Crouch coming back. Were you positioning yourself like on the offense, on the defense? Were you a line? Were you lineman? What kind of position and everything would you have been?
Yeah, so that's one of the mistakes that I made. Is I went, at that time I was like 6'3", about 220.
Mm-hmm.
So I listed myself as like a strong safety. I think they called it a rover at that time.
Yep.
So that's what I went for. Had I known what was going to happen with my body, I would have went as like a D lineman or something. Because not long after that, I suddenly was able, I had a hard time gaining weight up till that point. It was really hard for me to gain weight, and then it just flipped. I weigh 280 right now, and it's easy. And that's actually dropping down. I was up at around 300. So had I known that, I would have done something different. But anyway, yeah, I went for a safety position, which is one of the most athletic positions on the team. So anyway, it was dumb, but I didn't know any better back then. So
did you go through did you just go through the winter conditioning there? Did you even get into the spring practice, or did they already make cuts even before spring practice?
Yeah, they cut right before spring practice.
Gotcha.
So we did winter conditioning, and then we did we would do 7-on-7 drills after. So I got to do a lot of 7-on-7 drills, but didn't get to do any spring practice or anything like that.
Already loving some of the comments here. Eric Miller, love it when K-State fans melt. PJ, whoa, great. GBR Homer. Yeah, keep sending in the comments, everyone. A lot of fun here. Let's go to question 3. Who are your all-time favorite Huskers? You said it kind of tied in with question 2. Who are some of those favorites?
I would say Tommy, but then he put on that blue Creighton pullover, and I just I can't
couldn't take it.
Do it. Sorry, man. I can't.
That's fair. That's fair.
Growing up, it would have been probably Tommy and Amon Green, but today it's Taylor. I mean, I know people don't like him, or maybe, I don't know, some people don't like him or thought he wasn't that good or whatever. But man, that time frame, it was after everything we went through, and then that time frame, he was just, it was so electric, and it was you're always on the edge of your seat. And then, he gave me that great memory and a few others. I remember being in Wisconsin. I was mobilized. We got moved all over the place. So I was in Wisconsin in the middle of the winter, and during fall football season or whatever. And my buddy and I would go, that was a Husker fan. We'd go to the bars in Wisconsin. So in Wisconsin, not far from Madison, as Husker fans going to these bars watching football games. And it was always Taylor and those guys. So yeah, I would say probably Taylor at this point, although you could throw Tommy Armstrong in there. He was a warrior. So I don't know. I like them all. Scott Frost. I still
I mean,
like Scott, despite what
as a
people.
player, I mean, my goodness, he won us a championship, won 24-2 as a quarterback. Can't take that away. And that
Sorry, I
was
can't hate that guy.
well, that was an interesting time frame. The Taylor Martinez one is that we had such stability at quarterback for about a 10, 12-year period there. I mean, we only had Martinez started for about 4 years, Armstrong started for 3 to 4 years, and then Adrian. Really, there's very few schools in the country that had more stability at the position. Now we had all kinds of instability around it with coaches and changing offenses and all that, but the quarterbacks themselves,
injuries affected that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it doesn't seem like that because there were, all of them at different points had injuries and so forth. So it just kind of makes it seem a little weird or whatever. But you're right. Like, if you look back, our quarterback situation, I mean, even now, Casey last year, after coming off of Adrian and then go right into Casey and then probably have him again this year. We'll see how it shakes out. But I mean, they're not terrible quarterbacks. Like, I know people love to hate on the quarterbacks and stuff, but it definitely could have, not to rag on anybody, but I remember when it was Zach Lee and
Cody Green.
Green, and those offenses were a little rough, so it's been not so bad since then.
And recruiting is one of the weirdest things because that 2009 team that had Zach Lee and Cody Green, those are 2 4-star quarterbacks. And we had some amazing offensive talent, Niles Paul and Burkhead and Halou. I mean, we had some good players, Spencer Long on the O-line. And yet somehow, for whatever reason, that 2009 offense just couldn't click, which was such a shame because that 2009 defense was as good as any I've ever seen. I just had Cody Glenn on a week ago, and he graduated after 2008, but he was part of the Pelini transition on defense. And a lot of those guys that played. Oh, yeah, he switched. One of the things I wanted to ask him was what we're going through, and we'll get to this when we start talking about the question 4, but like, I was asking him about all the position changes and just the changes as a coaching transition happens and trying to tie it to what's going on right now. But yeah, he didn't just switch positions. He went from running back on offense to linebacker on defense. And those defenders, a lot of those same guys on the 2009 defense, I think it's the greatest one I've ever seen. I've watched all the 90s ones, but that 2009 defense was amazing. A lot of the same guys on that defense were guys that were playing in 2007 under Callahan when we lost at Colorado 60-something to 50-something, and we were just terrible. So
Kansas 70-35.
Yes,
I remember that was when I was like, okay.
I was at that game. I was at that game. Boomer and I were, and they had a deal going on with their bookstore where after every touchdown, every 7 points, you would get 5% off your it's something at the bookstore, 5% off on Tuesday. Kansas would. So it's like, oh, you get 5% off on Tuesday. Then they'd score a second touchdown. And it was like, hey, you get 10% off on Tuesday. And they scored on 10 straight possessions, touchdowns. And eventually we're like, how long does this go? Like, how long does this promotion go? And eventually
I'm going to the bookstore. I'm going to resell this stuff.
I'm going to Lawrence. I'm going to be selling, right? I mean, why not? And eventually it stopped after 6 touchdowns. You're like, yeah, that's all you get. So
you got to end that. That's crazy. Yeah. I remember that was brutal. I know that. So that's the other thing too. When people talk about rock bottom, I'm like, that was pretty bad. The end of the Riley era was pretty bad. I understand some of the Frost stuff, but I don't know if it's quite that bad. It got pretty bad there for a few of those years.
My thing with Frost era is that it underperformed, and the win-loss record absolutely underperformed. I can see a difference though. Not all 4-8s are made equal. The 4-8 that happened the last year of Riley, that's the worst football I've ever seen. We weren't competitive against teams.
Getting blown out.
The 3-9 that Frost had 2 years ago was better than that. Last year and how the season started last year, that was, what happened with Frost is, and I kind of appreciate how Trev handled it, is that Trev kind of let Frost fire himself. I mean, he gave him every opportunity, and by the end of it, it was one of those things where there wasn't much arguing anymore. I think if they would have made a change a year ago, I think you'd have had a fractured fan base, some people saying, keep him, don't keep him. When that Georgia Southern game happened, it was kind of like, okay, it's time to it's time to move on.
Yeah.
I think Scott even looked like he kind of wanted to move on.
Yeah, I wonder about that because I mean I'm one of those people that people would assume that if they had fired him before that I would have been disgruntled or whatever. And I don't I mean, I know me, I wouldn't have been that disgruntled. My thing was always like it actually started with Riley, because it was like you give a guy, and it's different now. It's different now with the transfer portal and the 1-year transfer rule. But it's like I just didn't at that time. I didn't feel like 3 years, and I wanted to at least get 4 years. And then you throw the COVID year in there, and it's a little weird. So it's like hard to assess how you figure all that stuff out. But if they had fired him before, like my preference would have been let's go all the way, see it all the way through, just to like completely make sure, because you're coming off that 3-9 season, which I know is bad. Bottom line is all that counts, etc. But all those games were close. And so I don't think it's crazy for someone to be like, well, maybe we can get over the hump or whatever. But then, yeah, you lose to Northwestern, and that was kind of the beginning where it's like, and then Georgia State's like, all right,
yeah, it was.
We've given every opportunity we can. Let's move on. So yeah, I think. I mean, I've seen people say that it basically wasted last year, which I understand that point, but I think Trev ultimately played it right because now, I mean, everybody's on board. There's not really any question, and we can all just sort of move on. So,
absolutely. Well, let's move on, and let's move on to that question about next year. Number 4, how do you think the Huskers will do this year? Obviously, a lot of changes happen. We've got the new coaching staff in place. Coach Rule, he's now the staff is done. He has his entire support staff of about 50 people. I think it's the largest support staff in the Big Ten, they said. So things are starting to look, you can kind of start to see how it's getting formed. What are your thoughts?
So 10-2. I'm going to give you a direct answer. We're going to go 10-2. All right.
Really?
Let me explain this. Okay. So
I'll allow it.
We were 4-8 last year, right? Now, 2 of those losses were Northwestern and Georgia Southern. I think we can all agree those aren't just coulda won games; those are shoulda won games, right?
Sure.
So that gets us to 6-6. I know we're not playing the same schedule, but I'm just going to kind of go through this. So that gets us to 6-6. Like people are like, "Oh, if we could go 6-6, that'd be great." It's like all we have to do is beat those 2 teams, right? Last year, so that's 6-6. And then we go to the other extreme. You have Michigan and Oklahoma. Okay, we'll keep Michigan a loss. Obviously, probably can't expect to win that the first year. Oklahoma's kind of a weird one because they ended up not being that great, but they also blew us out. It was right after Frost got fired, so we'll keep that a loss. That leaves Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Purdue. It's like Minnesota, we were up 10 at half. I think Illinois, we were up 10 or something like that until Casey got hurt. Purdue was 4-point game. And Wisconsin, we were leading with like a minute left in the game.
Yeah, double digits in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. So if you look at those games, it's like those aren't juggernaut teams that are like impossible to beat, first off. And even as horrific as everything was last year and all the turmoil and everything, we were still in those games at a certain point. So, and then you have to put on top of this the fact that we're going from what I'm told on Twitter, literally the worst coach and staff and strength and conditioning ever, to like literally the greatest coach to ever pick up a whistle. So it seems to me that he should be able to flip those games and get us to 10-2. So in fact, if he doesn't go 10-2, he's probably not the guy and we should fire him.
If we've learned anything Husker fans, it's that if we don't go 10-2, you gotta fire. If you don't, if we don't go 10-2, we gotta someone's gotta be fired, right? I mean, that's if we've learned anything. No, I think that's look,
I'm totally kidding. You don't have to try and justify that.
It's a crapshoot trying to predict this stuff, anyways, right? I mean, we've had analytic people on, like a college football professor, Adam McClintock, and with Matrix Analytical, and they break games down by the talent and say the more talented team's going to win 77.8% time, 77.8% of the time, right? And before last season, they had us going 8-4, and I can't say that they're wrong. And like you said, I asked him, do they have an analytic for how do you lose so many 1-score games? Because that's the question I had after the Frost era is like, is it just, and I was expecting some
It's the curse of
really smart,
Solich. That's how you lose all those 1-point games.
just culture. I was expecting some real smart answer from Adam about, is there an analytic for how do you lose these close games? And he's like, dumb luck, and making mistakes. I mean, it is penalties and it's not being disciplined. And what I like about when Trev, the day that he fired Frost and he was just answering questions in the presser, he just said the things he was looking for. He wanted someone to be a grinder, disciplined football, win the line of scrimmage, all the things that are music to my ears. And then I love everything since when he hires Rule talks about those things. When Rule introduces Satterfield as offensive coordinator, Satterfield talks about all those things. Yeah. Everyone seems to be on the same page, saying the same stuff. And that's a step up. I mean, to your point last year, we went 4-8 and it was clear as day from the first moment of the season that we had an offensive coordinator and a head coach who weren't on the same page at the very least.
Well,
and then
sorry, go ahead.
Well, and just kind of the rest of the season, there were times where it's like, wow, we're not on the same page, and yet we're still competing. How about we remove all that stuff? Let's just get on the same page and let's see how good we can be.
Yeah. So I think Rule and his staff and everybody. So it goes back to, and everybody has noted this, like, Trev, I want to hire someone that's not going to win the press conference. But it's clear to me that Rule understands the media perception, the fan perception thing. I don't think it's any coincidence. I don't think it's happenstance or chance that Trev mentioned those things in that press conference and then Rule mentions them in his. I don't think that's an accident. I don't think that it's an accident that all his staff is saying all those same things. Like, they know that they have to all be on the same page and they have to communicate a consistent message. So they're actually really media savvy is what it really comes off to me. Now, is that going to translate into wins? Hopefully, and I think it's a good sign, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case, right? They could just be, media savvy and they're saying all the right things, but it doesn't mean it's actually going to come to fruition. Now, that said, I'm excited about next year. I do think that we will have a step up. The thing that sticks out to me, and I've seen other people mention this, is that, and I've sort of been in a little bit, not anywhere like this, but just a sort of a little bit similar situation where, I had to take over a situation and then I moved somewhere else and then I had to basically come back and do the exact same thing again. So I had to do the same thing twice. And it's like the second time I did it, I went from the first time I was like, I think this is the right stuff to do. I think I know what I'm doing, and then some stuff worked, some stuff didn't. The second time I came back, I knew exactly what to do. I knew exactly what worked and there was no question about it. And that's the way they talk feels like that to me. Like, it's not, they're not questioning. They're not wondering. They're not thinking. They're not hoping. Like, this is what we have to do. This is what we're going to do. And they know what works. And so I think that's what gives me the most hope out of everything that I've heard, is they just seem like they're really certain. Again, that doesn't mean it's going to work out. We've heard, at this point, I've heard everything from everybody, all the different ways. So I hate to be the short on the field guy, but that's kind of at the point. I'm just like, wait and see, and we'll see what happens. So,
well, and I think that's okay to be that guy too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And look, there's nothing wrong with being the pessimist fan right now. There's nothing wrong with being the optimist fan. There's something wrong with being the Twitter jerk fan that who is
difference between
all
a realist and an A-hat.
Yeah. Everyone can have opinions and can have differences of it. And there's respectful ways to do that. But what I would say is, over the course of the last 20 years, what I've grown more tired of is when someone's like, well, what we need is this offensive guy, or we need an NFL guy, or we need a defensive guy. We've had it all. I mean, we've had about every conceivable, we brought in Frost as the former Husker. Riley's the P5 guy. Callahan came from the pros. Planey was the defensive guy. We've done a little bit of it all. And at the end of the day, I think what you need the right guy. And I'm as guilty of anything as saying this. I would have just said this a couple months ago, that I think it's important to have a Nebraska guy or two. They don't have to be head coaches, but a Nebraska guy or two on the staff, just so they can understand the culture. I've said that before.
Mm-hmm.
And then you bring in this staff, and there's not a damn Husker guy on it. There's not a single Nebraska guy on this staff, and yet you see how they operate. And it's like these guys understand this state more than the hell they understand it as well as I do. And I've lived here my entire life. You know, I mean, it's unbelievable to see Ed Foley go into Grand Island. And while he's there, let's stop by Sam Foltz's parents' house and go and talk to him for a while. I mean, and those they might be little things or whatever you want to call them, but they're important things. And it's like they get it. They seem to truly understand what this state's about. And I mean, that gets me as excited as anything, let alone the fullback and the X's and O's stuff that we've heard that's going to hopefully come back.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you were saying before about we've tried this and that, the other. Yeah, like I've been yelled at by from here to Timbuktu about all we got to do is this. It's just as simple. Blah, 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 like for, almost 20 years now. So like, I don't believe anybody who says anything about anything because I know I've like heard it all and none of them are right. Right.
Yeah.
So like, I'm sort of over that, but I think to what you were saying at the end there, it's, sometimes when you come into a situation and like you're familiar with it, you take things for granted. And I somewhat wonder if that's a little bit what happened with Frost is like he was so familiar with everything that he just kind of took things for certain things for granted maybe. Whereas, you come in as Matt Rule and you're completely new to all this stuff, you have to do the research. And if you're Frost, let's just say, or any Nebraska guy that's like played here before, let's just take the black shirts. You had the way that, they did it when you were playing, but you ask 10 people, you get 10 different opinions. And so a new guy has to actually go and do the research. You're right. So I think that some of that is maybe why that's happening is like they have to go and learn all this stuff. And they're like, oh, they learn about Sam Foltz and they're like, oh, we should do this. And they learn about black shirts and they learn about this, that, and the other. And they have to actually go and research and do it. And they don't take things for granted. So I sort of wonder if that's some of it.
I think that's a great viewpoint there. I think one of the things
thanks, man.
For me, it's constantly trying to find what is different. So when someone says, well, I've seen and heard all this before, I'm like, have you really? Because I haven't seen our coaches go out and travel the state the way that this one has, right. just to find a difference. I mean, there's something
tweet about it.
And tweet about
maybe
that
they have, but they just didn't post about it. But yeah, that's different.
What we've seen, with what they're doing in Texas with Dr. Elza, bringing in Bob Wager, Garrett McGuire, and I'm going to get his name right this week. I kept calling him Garrett McGee last week. Bringing guys like that, but bringing in people like that have those Texas connections, and then have it immediately turn around to having some Texas kids committing here. So we're seeing some early results now. We'll wait till we get on the field to see the W's and L's, but there are some early results. And I think something that was really unique about the hiring of Coach Rule was just the timing of it all. When's the last time you've seen a 75-day search where the guy that you end up hiring was available for about 60, 65 days of it? He had 2 months of an opportunity to sit at home, observe things, decide if he wanted to do this, take his family on an impromptu visit of Lincoln during a game day weekend where Trev drives him around. He gets to see the city and gets to see a game day in the city. Like, that's unheard of. Like, coaching, you think of how coaching hires typically work. It's unbelievable that any of them ever turn out well. You get about a week's time a lot of times with a lot of pressure, multi-million-dollar
Riley's
decisions.
a good example.
Riley, and Coach Osborne with Pelini. I mean, he had about a week to fire, hire, turn around, now go start recruiting. And Rule came in here, and he almost there's this calm. He comes in here like, I've had a couple months to think about this, and I've gone over it in my head, and my wife and kids were the ones that said, let's take it. And they just seem to be such on the same page. And he just took off running. And it's truly impressive. Him and Trev act like they have known each other for years and years because they almost finished each other's sentences. And I think a lot of that started in those 2 months.
Oh yeah.
Of that, the courtship of Trev and Matt Rule. And I'm glad they had that time.
Yeah, that's why, again, going back to, people have said like last year was kind of a lost year or whatever. And again, understand that viewpoint. I'm not discounting it, but that's why I think ultimately the way Trev did it was the right way, because, or maybe not the right way, but it worked out really, really well because he had all of that time and Matt Rule had all of that time to really go through everything and be thorough and make sure on the same page. And, if you look back over the last 20 years, like we focus on head coaches, but a lot of the dysfunction, or at least some of the dysfunction that was happening, was above the head coach level, and particularly not being on the same page, or just weird crap happening or whatever. And like, it feels like for the first time, I initially thought with Moose that we were getting there. It seemed like they're definitely more aligned than like Eichhorst and Riley and even back to Pelini and all that. But apparently Moose was absentee mostly, so whatever. Anyway, it just seems like they're way more on the same page above the head coach level, and everybody's like in line. And I think at this level of college football and the way it is today, like, it's really hard to succeed if you don't have that continuity, that being on the same page from top to bottom, from the chancellor, the AD, the president, the head coach, all the way down. So again, that's another thing that I'm kind of excited about as well for next year to see what happens. So,
well, we are on a 1-game winning streak, and I thought I'd be remiss if I didn't at least bring this up. But the last game, you have a wonderful Twitter handle, and you do a great job. And you have a particular dislike of Iowa, and I can appreciate that. So this is from November 30th.
Okay, but you know why that is?
Well, is it Nebraska City being right on the river? What is it?
I said that it's because they didn't recruit me out of high school. No.
Oh, well, that's true.
No.
Sorry, Casey.
My wife is from Iowa. So and when I got back from Iraq, I moved to Iowa, and I lived in Iowa for 10 years. All her family are Iowa friends. So like, I just constantly, it's a double-edged sword, because I constantly hear it from them, but I've lived there long enough to know like what irritates the crap out of them as well. So I know that fan base really, really well. So that's why I love picking on them, because I hear it constantly.
And they know it works well against us, and beating us 7 straight times worked well. But damn it, when we end that streak, and we did it last year, you're going to hear it back. And this is you for November 30th.
Don't whine about it.
Yeah, don't whine. Here you are on November 30th. I have to say, these stupid little Iowa jokes I make just hit different after beating them, because we did beat them. They lost to us. Man, that would suck. # first straight. And that has led to this whole series. And these are gold. Anybody that's watching this, I know if you're listening to this tomorrow, you can't see them, but I've got a list of like 5-6 tweets up here. And Iowa women's basketball plays defense like Iowa football plays offense. What do you call an Iowan with all his teeth? A tourist. Beat Iowa at another thing. Yawn. What's new? Iowa's only fans are a group of confused tourists who thought they were going to a corn maze. I mean, this is why we brought you on here, Johnny. Anyone that's not on Twitter and watching this, I don't think you fully appreciate the guests that we have on right now, because Johnny, you have a great persona there. It's so much fun to interact with you on Twitter, and just reading through those, I have a huge grin.
Well, I appreciate that. I try to lighten the mood, because it sometimes gets a little heavy and a little serious. So I try to keep it light or whatever. That was actually when I first got on Twitter and decided to start talking about Husker football. That was the reason why. It's like, I was seeing all this stuff, and it's like, man, it's so serious. And not to get weird, but it's like the places I've been and things I've done in my life, I'm like, dude, it's not that serious. Like, it's a game. At the end of the day, for the people playing, it's a livelihood. For you, the fan, it's a game. Like, just chill out a little bit. So yeah, just try to lighten the mood, and making fun of Iowa. That's like the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Just playing to make fun of.
And isn't that part of the fun of being a fan too? And rivals. I mean, look, Nebraska, I'm going to pick on us for a second, and I'll pick on me specifically. Growing up, it was Nebraska and Oklahoma, and that's it. And there's no other rivals. That's it. And that rivalry meant so much to me. And I think it clouded my head, because it created this thing where we only play one team that's a rival, Oklahoma. And when they went away, we don't have one anymore. And no, we played Kansas 100+ times. We played Missouri. We played K-State. We played Iowa State. We played Colorado. We had all kinds of rivals. We were too good for them in my head, and I didn't give them the
Yeah.
respect. Well, we get
Oh
into the
yeah.
Big Ten, and that was a big knock. Iowa fans didn't like Nebraskans because they're not our rival because they're not good enough to be our rival. Or other schools would think the same thing. Well, the reality is I think we're starting to get some good rivalries going. It is fun with
Yeah.
Iowa. The Nebraska flex stuff with Minnesota is fun. Wisconsin, let's beat these guys. I mean, there's some fun things that are starting to form in this conference, in this division, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah,
Even
we're
without the
like
wins.
yeah. I do feel like we're like kind of getting a little bit more integrated into the conference. It'll probably help when USC and UCLA come in, because then they'll be the newbies that everybody hates on or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I remember, so our first Big Ten game was against Wisconsin. We got beat
Yep.
like 49-17. So I was living in
Got
Iowa
that.
at the time. And my brother-in-law, we'd been talking all off season and all this stuff. First year in the Big Ten, he's a big Iowa fan, and he comes over to watch the game with me. And when they get up on us and start spanking us, he'd been drinking, but he starts running around my house yelling "on Wisconsin" as an Iowa fan. So for me, that basically cemented the rivalry. That's why I never deny that it's a rivalry. And then, of course, like him and I then got tickets to the Nebraska Iowa game that year in Lincoln.
Mhm.
So we went to the very first Nebraska Iowa game in the Big Ten, and of course we beat them. But he's still talking smack about how all the other teams in the Big Ten beat us. Like, yeah, but you didn't. So, which is classic Iowa fan, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's like an SEC kind of thing. You're rooting just for someone else in your conference and chanting the conference name. What is that? It's funny. Yeah, Bo went 3-1 against Iowa in his first 4 years, and making the transition
I
into
know
the conference.
they always say like, you guys got to the Big Ten and you started getting spanked. Like, dude, we were 3-1 on you. We were beating you. We were beating Minnesota. We were beating Northwestern. They were a little bit of thorn in our side, but I knew from living in Iowa for like 6 or 7 years before that, they did the same thing to Iowa all the time. So they were a thorn in Iowa's side before that. But yeah, I was like, we didn't come into the Big Ten and like you guys just started, like everybody in the conference started destroying us. Wisconsin did, right?
Mhm.
Ohio State did, but not you guys, not Minnesota, not Iowa, not Illinois, not Purdue. We were beating all of those teams under Bo for like on a fairly regular basis. So it's what everybody that's a Nebraska fan knows. Like, we got rid of Bo, and then there was this whole mess that happened, and I'm not gonna rag on any of those coaches, but that's when it started, and it just hasn't got fixed. So
Yeah, keep making changes, and you're gonna pay for it over time. We have paid for it, but switching conferences is a tough thing when you play a whole new set of teams. And I can remember going to Norman in 2021, and we lose, of course, by 1 score because that's what we do. But we lose at Oklahoma, and afterwards I talked with a bunch of Sooner fans, and they were good people and everything, but they were like, "Oh man, we're going to go in the SEC, and we're going to win it all in year one." And I'm like, you may, but also I would really just appreciate what it means to switch conferences. You're going to be playing all new teams, all new venues. There's a transition there. Oh, don't worry about it. Coach Riley has this figured out. We've got top 10 classes for the next however many years. This Caleb Williams guys who didn't even play against you guys today. Oh man, he's going to be the starter for the next 3 years. And all I can say is it's amazing how quick things can change. And, it always appreciate when things are good. Yeah. One of my favorite follows on Twitter is Message Board Geniuses, and it's always appreciate when things are going well, because I love it when I see them post some Alabama fan who's like, the game's passed Saban by, we should get rid of him. I'm like, oh, please do, please get rid of him.
Whiners, jeez. Oh, we haven't won a national championship in like 3 or 4 years. Please.
Yes, and I'm old enough to remember where, unfortunately, some people wearing this color, were saying the same thing. And Coach Osborne was fired thousands of times. I like to say thousands of times over the course of his career at Nebraska, because he couldn't beat Oklahoma, couldn't win the big one, didn't throw the ball enough, lost 7 straight bowl games, including the last one that he lost was the one your first one that you remember, that 94 Orange Bowl. I mean, but
you remember what it was like?
What's that?
Like, we would lose a game, and it was just like, I mean, I was a kid. It was like someone died. Like, that's how
church
bad
the
it
next
was.
morning after
Yeah,
a
your
loss.
whole
Like,
weekend was ruined, and you can't do that now because it happens like 7 or 8 times a year. Like your whole fall's ruined if you do that. The way it's been.
Or you start a podcast in April 2017, and we haven't seen a bowl game and we're supposed to be primarily a football, men's basketball, and baseball pod. That's kind of how we started it, and eventually, we
We're a
don't know
volleyball
much
pod
about
now.
like volleyball and stuff. But it's like, how do you not talk about volleyball? We're a women's sporting, a women's school here right now with sports. My goodness, what basketball, what softball's done, bowling, volleyball. And we want to cheer wins, and thank goodness for all those sports, because
we're anything
it
but a
hasn't been
football and men's basketball podcast now.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
But
it's been brutal.
when we start winning a few basketball games like that's the funny thing too about Husker
That was
fans.
fun.
It took 4 wins in a row, and Nebraska fans in basketball, all of a sudden, like, expectations change so quickly. It's stupid. So back to your point, we're going to go 10-2, right? Or whatever the record is. If I predicted, let's say I predict 8-4, and someone says, "Are you telling me you wouldn't take 6-6?" No, I'm not saying I wouldn't take it. I'm just saying I'm predicting 8-4. I guarantee you this: if we somehow started off 4-0, we go to Minnesota and we win, we go to Colorado and win, and we come back and we beat the 2 teams you're supposed to, and you're 4-0 and Michigan's coming in here.
Oh yeah.
The expectations and the way that minds get flipped so fast, all of a sudden it's like we're not going 6-6. Are you kidding me? We're 4-0. Like, people start to change their mind as they see the product on the field, and so we need some momentum. We need momentum, and that's the thing. That's the thing we just haven't had for the last 5-6 years.
That's the thing. That's why I'm like, I don't believe. I know I'm an a-hole, but I don't believe any of like the people that are like super all in on Rule right now. Because I know if we start next season like 2-2 or 1-3 or whatever it is, like it's gonna take like 2 losses, and it's gonna be those same people will be telling you, "Oh, he needs to go. He's not the guy. I could have told you that when he did so and so back at this press conference, and when he hired this guy, blah 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 blah." It's like, so I don't. That's why I don't like I'm not getting caught up in all of that right now, because I know that very quickly, like you said, we could be 4-0 and then lose to Michigan, and there will be someone that's like, they got to get rid of this guy. He's not the guy, blah 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 blah. So yeah, I'm just waiting. I'm gonna see what happens. Let it all play out. They'll play the games. We'll see, and we'll go from
there. And you know what? Sit back and enjoy a little bit of the process too. I know that's as much of a cliche word, process, as culture is, but there is a process. And right now, I'm just genuinely enjoying the process of watching this offseason play out, of watching this staff get to know fans, watching this staff go out to all these different high school coaches and high schools, and then turn around here in about a month. We're going to have the coaches clinic, the high school coaches clinic, and I want to see the reverse of it. I want to see all those high school coaches. We've had Glenn Snodgrass on from York in the past, and I was DMing with him about this too. Is like, I want to see the influx of coaches coming back to Lincoln to be with this staff. I love that. I love seeing the relationship building, and that has, there's not a W or L tied to that, but I just love watching the process of it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I hadn't even thought about that. Like, you go out, build those relationships, and those dividends come back to you. And maybe that's a thing that hasn't happened at a high level for a very long time or whatever. So yeah, I probably sound like I'm like negative on the next year, but I'm actually really excited. I think they'll do well. I think so. I don't think that the team is as in bad a shape as some other people do. Like, people, it's the worst shape it's ever. I don't buy that. I don't buy it. Like, I don't believe that at all. And I don't think I genuinely don't think that Rule or any of the other coaches think that. So, and all signs point to these guys seem like they know what they're doing. So going back to those games, like, it's kind of a joke, but it's also not. Like, if you look at all of those games, there's really one that the team, we might say, quote unquote, unbeatable, at least right now or whatever. And that was Michigan. And even that, who knows? And then Oklahoma, again, weird game. The rest of those games, every single one of those games is a game that we could win. Those teams are not just juggernauts that are impossible to beat. So these guys seem like they know what they're doing, and I think they will. I do think that they will have that we'll see improvement, and we'll see how that translates out into games or whatever. But I don't think it's crazy to say that they could win 7, 8, 9 games next year, even with a new transition. Not an expectation. Not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying if it happened, I wouldn't be that surprised, because they've got a lot of returning players that have played a ton of football. They brought in some good transfers, and if they really are what everybody tells me they are, then we should see some improvement. So I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully it's not 3-9, because that would suck.
Yeah, and I think it is important that they demonstrate some success early on. We saw that in the Frost era. Some of it bad luck, a lightning strike against Akron, you're not playing, but getting off to a poor start, I think, was something where he was kind of climbing always from behind.
Yeah.
And I think it is important next year to have some success. And what does that look like? I've called it the race to 6. And that is, let's get to 6 wins next year. I didn't say go 6-6. The race to 6. It might, if it takes us 6 weeks and we're 6-0, hey, let's reevaluate. Let's get to 8. Let's get to 9, right? And if we're sitting at, if we're 5-6 with Iowa coming here, that's okay.
If we're 6-0, that means we beat Michigan. Like, we're going undefeated. Like, at that point, you just go all in, push chips in, place your bet. We're going 12-0.
It's 12-0 then. But if we're 5-6 with Iowa coming in here, that's fine. Go beat them, and let's get to 6-6 and get to that bowl game. And I think if nothing else, that kind of gets them off to the right start, starts to build some of that momentum. Because you said something earlier about, when you did a job, went away and came back and did the job a second time, you had a different perspective. You were better at it. And you just said that, this isn't the worst you've ever seen. You didn't think the team's that bad right now. Well, put yourself in the shoes of Coach Rule. He's done this before. Yeah. He's done it at a place like Baylor, where he walked into
he's licking his chops, to be honest.
Oh my God. He walked in at Baylor and they had 45 guys on scholarship and they were coming off the Bryles disaster. He comes in here and he has NIL and hundreds of millions of dollars of facilities getting built. And he's sitting there going, I've got 105 players. This is the greatest thing. He's dancing around on cloud 9.
And I'm playing in a league where, at least a division for now, that like we can win some games. We're not. It's not a division of killers. So, the division, at least. I need 3 things from Matt Rule next year. We need to beat Iowa again, always, forever, like by 50. Don't take your foot off the gas this time. I know it wasn't him, but Minnesota we need to finally beat, because like they're getting annoying. And then I cannot have us go to Colorado, completely take over their stadium, make Dion look like a fool, and then them win the game. Like, I can't. Like, this just can't happen. So we can't do that again. So he's got to win those 3 games. If he wins those 3 games, I'll be fine. He can do whatever else he wants with the rest of them, but those 3 games we got to get. So that's my bottom line.
That's a great line of success there. And you keep bringing up painful games. The first game when we played Wisconsin in 2011, we were at that Colorado game in 19. The sellout. It's just, come on. We were up 17-0 at half, and you're right. Those are games. The Minnesota one's huge because it's game 1. It's a Thursday night, but that's we can look at all the transition that we've had, but look at Minnesota right now. Half their coaching staff has changed from last year. They have a different quarterback now for the first time in a century. Finally. Yeah, Mo Ibrahim is gone at running back.
For the first time in half a century.
For the first time in half a century. So there's plenty of changes that they've had too. Now let's go out there, and that's a team that we were up 10-0 at halftime against. Let's go out there and let's build some of that early momentum. Can you imagine? I'm just, we got to go into fantasy land for a second, but we're going to beat Minnesota on the road in week 1. And flat out, we should beat Colorado in week 2. That's a program that's going through a lot of transition, a lot of change. And we should do it in front of a lot of fans, a lot of Husker fans.
Yes.
And to be 2-0 coming back home, I think would be an amazing scene in Memorial Stadium on September 16th, whatever that would be, when we play. I think it's like Northern Illinois in week 3.
Yeah, then it's 2 like lesser opponents after that, right?
Yeah, group of 5 opponents, and then it's Michigan.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not crazy to say it could be 4-0. I mean, 3-1, it seems like almost, again, going back to last year, we were 1-2, and at that point we really should have been 3-0. Like, it's not crazy to say we should have been 3-0. So looking at that next year, it's not crazy to say we should be 3-1. I know that that's like the typical offseason hype Nebraska fan thing, but when you look at those games, you're right. I mean, Minnesota's the one that, okay, they're a Big Ten team. It's on the road. It's the first game after all of this transition and all that stuff. So I kind of understand how that game might be a little rough, but like you said, they've got transition too, so we'll see. But yeah, if we were 3-1, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that'd be a decent start. Well, this was a lot of fun here, Johnny.
Good.
It's tradition on the Redcast on the forum. I always give the guest the final parting shot. But I mean, before we even do that, is there anything else you want to talk about football wise next season? Anything we didn't hit on that you want to before we take it off?
No, I think I got all my Twitter beefs off my chest, so I'm good at this point. So no, I think I'm good.
Well, I want to thank all the people that have been following along too, and all the comments that have been coming in. That's been a lot of fun. It is parting shot time here, and let me see if I can find that graphic. Or do I even have a graphic for that? You know what? I don't have a graphic for parting shot on this. I should. Anyways, it's parting shot. So, Johnny, go for it. Take us out of here.
I wasn't really prepared for this, but F Iowa, go Big Red. We coming, Dion. And tell Rob's mom I said hi. Again, Coach.
Well, that's
Thanks,
good,
Coach.
man. That takes us out. Thank you so much, HuskJohnny, Johnny GBR. Geez, I've got different names for you there. Find him at GBR Homer on Twitter, and just remember, Redcasters, you too could be the next one to join us on the forum.
A Herd at Sports Network production.